Hi, thanks for taking a few minutes to watch this video on service dog training. Since I've received my service dog, Luna, I get lots of questions each day when I go out into the public, and that's okay. That's how we learn. And so it got me to thinking that maybe we need to just have a sit down conversation with Luna's trainer and my trainer, basically, on service dogs and how they're trained and some of the common questions that people ask. And I hope that this is a help to you. Tamara works for Lorenzo's dog training service. It's a national company, and she'll tell you more about that in just a minute. And so here's my interview with Tamara.
I think that it would be good for others to hear kind of what we've gone through, because I get a lot of questions from different people when I go to churches and even out and about. I get asked questions, and so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first?
Sure.
And then I'll ask some questions.
Absolutely. My name is Tamara McKinney. I'm an executive team trainer with Lorenzo's dog training team. We're spread out all over the country. We have about 80 trainers on the team, and my market is here in Charleston, South Carolina. I've trained a little bit over 100 dogs, and Luna being one of them. And Luna was also one of the first service dogs that I've trained.
Great. Well, I'm really pleased. I know my wife is pleased, and so is my doctor with what Luna is able to do and how she's such a help to me. But let me ask you a few questions.
Sure.
One, because when we go out and about, some of the equipment that we use, people question. We've talked about that numerous times.
Absolutely.
They also want to come up. They just start talking, which is good for me because I try to avoid people, but Luna kind of brings people to want to ask questions and those things. But they also, I think, sometimes innocently want to touch and pet. They think Luna's just your regular pet.
Right.
And she's not.
Exactly.
Can you tell us a little difference between the obedience training and the service training, and why it needs to be different? Those dogs aren't the same.
Absolutely. So, we all know that we love our animals. We'd love to take them everywhere that we go, and however, we have the difference here between an actual working service dog and a home pet. And then we've also got the difference between an emotional support animal as well. Emotional support animals are not the same as service dogs, and they also are not protected under the ADA the same way a service dog is as well. So a service dog is actually a dog that performs a task for the owner that helps the owner mitigate, or that helps the dog help mitigate the owner's disability. We have someone that has, either physical limitations or, is in a wheelchair. That dog is going to be specifically trained for mobility work. Then we have dogs that are trained to, assist people with, PTSD issues and things like that. Simply something as retrieval can be a task. When we drop an item, that dog is trained to pick that item up and give it to the owner, so the owner doesn't have to bend down for whatever that reason may be. In actual ESAs, emotional service dogs, they don't have to have any formal training of any kind. They are just there to comfort the owner. They most of the time do not have any obedience training whatsoever, and they can be a distraction, and a crucial obstacle for real service dog handlers, which can be a problem, and it's a problem as we speak at the very moment. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into, an airport with my service dog, and there's an ESA with a service dog vest on that's lunging at my dog. And Luna is also specifically trained to ignore people that approach her because of that reason, because she attracts a lot of attention. Everybody sees a dog, hey, I want to pet the dog, but that's not necessarily the case, because service dogs are medical equipment. It's no different than a person having a wheelchair, or anything else that might be medical equipment, so we should treat it as such. Actually, distracting a service dog is a felony in our country. And you should never distract a service dog while it's working, because you could be distracting that dog from doing its job.
Okay, I didn't know that about the law.
Mm-hmm.
The ESA dogs provide play an important role in a person's mental and emotional health.
Sure,
right?
Sure, they do.
Yeah. and they do have some rights, but when it comes to where they can live and those type of things, correct?
So ESAs, they are only allowed to be in housing that doesn't allow pets, and they are allowed to travel with the owner in the cabin on an airplane.
Okay.
As far as anything else, public access rights, there is no such thing for an emotional support dog.
How about service dogs like Luna? Are there limitations where they can go?
There is not. However, the only time that a service dog can be denied by any point is if it is private property. So, for example, if you're going to somebody's home and they own that property and they tell you, "Hey, don't bring the dog in here," then that's a possibility. However, if it's a public or government place, then they have to have access required by law.
I told you recently, a few weeks ago, I was in a church in North Carolina, and I was speaking each night, and one of the women there had an ESA dog, and it was a small dog. But when she would bring the dog in, it would just start yapping like crazy at Luna. And I could tell after a little while, it starts to irritate
Sure,
the
absolutely.
service dog. Even though she was great most of the time, she would come to the platform with me. She'd lay down. She'd keep her eyes on me. She knew what was going on, but the ESA dog was constantly yapping at her from time, or not constantly, but she was letting Luna know she was there.
Right.
When that happens, is there a certain protocol? Is there, or is it just common courtesy that you remove the dog?
So that's a great question, Rod, because when we have, there's been many times where I've walked into a store such as Walmart or so, and anybody and everybody brings their dogs in there. They buy a vest online, they slap it on the dog, and there you go, right? That's unfortunately not how it works, and it is also illegal. And what can actually happen in that case is that dog is essentially distracting over a working dog. So you can actually legally ask that person to remove that dog from the premises for acting that way. Just as much as, any public place such as a store would be able to remove that person and their dog from the facility.
Even though they have a vest on them, they're not actually
Absolutely,
service dogs.
absolutely. In the ADA law, it actually states that, when we have a dog that's, exhibiting any kind of distractive behavior, barking, jumping, going potty and things like that, that you have legal right to ask that dog to leave.
And so, and service dogs, I love what you teach us. And Tamara says service dogs are animals, and sometimes they have good days, sometimes they have bad days.
Absolutely.
And they may be asked to leave if they're having a bad day.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, they absolutely can. Now, it's less likely for that to happen with an actual trained dog.
Mm-hmm.
However, again, they're not robots. Obviously, they're living, breathing animals. So they are going to make mistakes. They're not perfect. Nobody's perfect, not even humans. So we have to take that into consideration when we have, a service dog. But there are things that are going to happen. They might have an accident, in a store one day. It's happened to myself with my dog, and it's happened maybe once in the last 4 or 5 years. So it's not something that should happen constantly. Obviously, your dog should be potty trained, but yes, things like that do happen. However, if we have a dog that's, consistently barking or, pulling at the end of the leash, then we might want to reevaluate the training of that dog and go back to the basics with it.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about the equipment for just a minute, because there are different opinions about how to train a dog. Some believe that it's all reward, stimulus based, right? Some believe that there's some negative, I guess we could say aversion training.
Sure.
And so with Luna, we put the Springer collar on, and my first day working with you, you put that on, I was a little hesitant.
Right.
Right. But let's talk about those collars and the benefits of those, and really explain that it's not all negative.
Absolutely. So the first thing we have is, we have what we call a pinch collar, also known as a prong collar. The collar is actually designed, if you take it apart and look at it, to imitate mom's teeth around the dog's neck when the dog was a puppy, and mom would correct that puppy. So it's the same effect there. So first of all, we have to understand that dogs learn differently than humans. They learn through physicality and repetition, right? So repetition is doing things over and over again, and the physicality of things is using the proper equipment. Now, we never ever would recommend using our hands or anything like that to train a dog, right? No negativeness with our hands ever, only positive praise. So instead of giving Luna a treat when we're training with her, we're going to give her love and affection with our hands. And that's the positiveness in our training. And what happens is we're being physical with the dog, right? Because they learn through physicality and repetition. And then what happens is, sure, they'll sit and stay for that treat, but when the treat goes away, so does the attention and the respect. So especially with a dog like Luna, who's a service dog, we need training to be extremely reliable. You know, we can't have, you know, am I going to do it, am I not going to do it? Because your life and someone else's life depends on this dog working for you. So we essentially gave Luna a job there. So with the pinch collar there, you know, the biggest thing is learning how to use the equipment properly. There's many ways that people think they know how to use things. They see things online because, you know, oh, this happened and that happened, but do they really know the full story behind it? And it's usually not caused by the actual tool itself, but more so user error. You know, if the collar is not placed correctly, if the collar is not fitted correctly for the dog, if the collar is used improperly, you know, things like that. And, you know, it's all about, you know, I always use the term or this analogy to explain to people, you know, I have a kitchen knife, which can be dangerous, right? I can either cut the vegetables in the kitchen when I'm cooking dinner. If I'm not careful, I can cut my finger off. So it's the same scenario there. You know, we have to make sure, and the biggest thing with us is we educate our clients on how to use equipment properly, and also teaching them confidence about this equipment, because you are going to get, you know, judged out in public about it. You know, I want you to be able to feel confident about, I'm working with a professional, I know how to use this equipment, you know, and there's nothing else to it. You know, this is your dog, you're working with the dog, you're seeing the results. We're not hurting Luna in any way, we're communicating with her in a way that makes sense to her.
Right.
Because she has no idea when, you know, I'm getting a short, of course she can tell when my voice is upset, right, when she does something wrong or such. But does she really have any idea when I say she chewed up that $3,000 rug? Most likely not, because she's not a human. So I have to communicate with her in a way that's fair, if that makes sense.
Right. And that collar, there's the prong collar.
Mm-hmm.
One, it's not sharp.
Correct.
Two, it's not digging into the skin.
Absolutely.
Right. And talk just a little bit about the confidence that you mentioned confidence for the owner,
That's right.
but it also helps with the confidence for the dog.
Absolutely. And the biggest thing too is, you know, if you're confident, we have to remember that our emotions run down the leash. So if you're confident, she's going to feel confident. You know, if you're feeling anxious, your emotion runs down the leash. She's going to start feeling anxious too. You know, dogs are very in tune, you know, with our emotions. And we've got a German Shepherd who is even more in tune with our owner's emotions. You know, so if we feel good about it, she's going to feel good about it.
Right.
You know, we're not going to start putting on equipment and start cranking and yanking and all that crazy stuff. You know, we have to give her a chance to come along properly. You know, and the edges on this collar, those specifically the Hermsprenger brand, is rounded at the edges. They're not sharp, you know, straight across edges that dig into the skin. And we also don't want the collar to be skin tight either. We want there to be a little bit of slack.
Right.
However, we don't want too much slack to where it's hanging down as a necklace around here, because we've got the esophagus down here, and then we've got the shoulders down here as well. So if we give a correction from that aspect, it can be harmful, of course. That's why I say we always want to make sure it's fitted properly, and it's in the correct spot on the dog's neck as well.
Right, which makes a tremendous difference. The other collar, the e-collar that we went to, and she wears them both.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't wear the e-collar all the time. It comes off, I think we were talking about after 8 hours,
Mm-hmm.
she needs a break.
Absolutely.
But even the e-collar, I found several things. People want to call it a shock collar, and I guess it is in a sense, but it's an electronic collar. It's a stimulator
That's right.
that's got a vibrator on it too. And for her, rarely do I ever have to use it
Mm-hmm.
because she's learned quickly.
Right.
And it's I think it goes along with the confidence too. Talk about the e-collar.
Absolutely. So e-collars, you know, the very first thing I do with an e-collar when I have a client is I have the client try it first. So that way they understand what they're putting on their dog. Because we have also still the false sense of it's a shock collar, right? So back in the 90s and the early 2000s, they were electrical shock collars. And that's why people still perceive them as such. So this specific collar is waterproof. The dog can go swimming with it. And it's got a 3/4 mile range to it. So, you know, the first thing about it not being a shock collar is if it was an electric current going through the collar, there would be no way that the dog would go into the water with it. So it's more comparable to a TENS unit. You know, something that chiropractor uses on your back to stimulate your muscles. So it's the same concept. It stimulates the muscle, and also the key is just enough to get the dog's attention. Not to turn the thing up as far as it goes. You know, you're going to figure out the dog's actual setting, what they're, you know, tolerating. Some dogs it's a little bit higher, some dogs it's a little bit lower. And the real goal here is to start weaning them off of all this equipment because they've gone through all the training, they know better, you know, and our goal is to have no equipment on her at all except for a leash and just a regular flat collar. Now, it also depends on the dog and the owner, how soon that happens. Every dog and owner is different. You know, it also depends on how consistent the owner is as well. So, you know, if we have a dog that's in this equipment, but the owner doesn't work with it very much, it's going to be in the equipment a little bit longer. If we have someone that diligently works their dog, then we're going to be out of it a little bit quicker.
Great. Yeah, I am totally convinced that the e-collar is an essential. And all the training is really the obedience and the advanced obedience convince me that a dog is happier with that training because it really does give them more freedom.
Right, absolutely. You're absolutely right about that. You know, we have a dog that's gone through, you know, basic obedience level 2, which is service dog level obedience. And essentially, this dog has more freedom than a dog that really hasn't been trained. Because then we have restrictions for this dog that hasn't been trained. You know, a dog can never be off leash, go fetch a ball. You know, because it's most likely going to run away or it's going to run into the road where it could possibly get hit by a car.
Right.
You know, and again, with the e-collar, it's also using the equipment properly. I'm not going to put this, you know, collar on a dog and start hitting buttons. I have to properly condition the dog to use it. So that way the dog understands what does it mean. You know, just like with a person, we can't just start, you know, expecting things and then blow everything out of proportion because then, you know, you can shut a dog down. You can also shut a dog down by feeding it too many treats, right? And then we don't really get anywhere with training. So it can go either way, you know, depending on what the equipment is, but education about the equipment and using it properly is key. You know, and at the same time, Luna's a happier dog for it because she does have more freedom. You know, I'm sure that you walk her off leash, you know, as much as you can. And our e-collar is also a communication tool for when there's not a leash on the dog and the dog is 50 or 100 yards away from us.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like it's like having a leash on without a leash, and she understands when I feel this sensation, I need to come back to you. So it's off leash reliability and recall as well.
Right. Yeah, she really is a much happier dog, I think, because of it. Got a couple other questions. See, I'm half blind here. I have to take my glasses off to read. How about that? Let's go back for just a moment to the service training. And Luna's trained as my PTSD service dog.
Correct.
And sometimes people, it's kind of interesting, people come up to me and they love Luna and they start asking questions and they'll go, and they can't quite figure out how to ask. So what's wrong with you? You don't look like anything's wrong with you, right? And so I've actually put on the vest PTSD service dog finally. One, it's none of their business, but I get why they want to know because I don't have any physical limitations that they can tell. I mean, I've got back issues and those type of things.
Sure.
So Luna does some things for me. We've taught her how to block and cover now. We've taught her how to pick up when I'm having anxiety attacks, and and so she'll get in my lap, she'll place, and that's called grounding.
Right. Yep.
For those that see service dogs out, talk a little about other services that they do other than what Luna does for me.
So, you know, like we talked about in the beginning here about, you know, mobility dogs. So usually when we have a mobility dog, we want to make sure that the dog is, you know, obviously the right size. You know, we're not going to have a Chihuahua service dog be a mobility dog for someone. You know, so there's things like, you know, a couple of trainers on our team actually trained a Doberman for a young lady that was in a wheelchair. And the dog is actually trained to get things from the fridge for her, you know, help pull her around in her wheelchair, you know, if she doesn't have the strength to do that. You know, there's other things such as deep pressure therapy, you know, for a person that has anxiety, where the person just kind of sits down, the dog gets in their lap and keeps them kind of grounded. So it's similar to, you know, the place command. However, some people feel more comfortable sitting on the ground, having the dog lay in their lap. And then we have other things such as, let's see, turning off the lights for some people, you know, in the house, you know, when they're in bed, if they're immobile in any way, opening doors, closing doors, you know, things like that. There's so many things. I mean, service dog can learn up to, you know, 25, 30 different tasks for people, you know, depending on the severity of that person's condition. You know, but it's service dogs are, you know, specifically trained to that specific person's needs. So it's not a one size fits all type thing.
So utility tasks, there's also where service dogs are helping with people who have diabetes and their
That's your medical
sugar
alert dogs.
starts to drop and those type of things as well. So they're actually quite amazing at the things that they can learn to do. For a service dog now, we've been working with Luna for a little over 6 months, right? That's pretty quick.
It is.
Right. And I want people to understand that I don't think that that's typical, is it?
It's not. So usually we have, again, this is pertaining to that specific person's needs, and it usually takes between, you know, anywhere from 6 months to 24 months to fully train a service dog. And the reason that a lot of times it takes almost 2 years is because most people start out with a very young puppy. You know, we have to wait for that puppy to, you know, go through puppyhood, right? So we have to worry about socialization. Then we have to worry about potty training. You know, then teaching the dog the obedience. You know, then teaching tasks. And then we have public access. But the biggest thing we have to worry about with a young puppy is the mental and physical maturity of that dog. You know, Luna was already 2 years old when she came into your care. So she was already physically and mentally mature. So then we were able to, you know, knock out the obedience level 2, which she picked up extremely quickly, and then move right on to those tasks, which that whole thing took about 6 months of time. And, you know, your dog will let you know if it's ready for it. You know, if you're able to, you know, have a reliable recall or, you know, even obedience and even your tasks, the dog is letting you know it's ready, okay? You know, when we're going out in public, you know, and the dog is doing exactly what it needs to be doing, that dog is ready, you know. So it kind of depends on exactly each dog itself and then, of course, the owner. However, the most typical amount of time it takes to train a service dog is, you know, between 18 and 24 months.
And do you think for Luna it made a difference because we're together 24 hours a day, and as the owner, I'm constantly doing those things that you've trained us to do? That
Absolutely. So you guys are working together all the time, and that's why we specifically didn't do a board and train program for Luna, because most of your service dogs, they're board and train programs. Because we have to potty train that puppy, we have to, you know, socialize it, you know, we have to start the obedience, because most of the time, you know, the owner either isn't able to put in the work, or they have some kind of physical limitations already, which is why they need a service dog. But in this case, it actually worked out perfectly because she was already so attached to you. You know, and you were great working with her. You know, you worked every single day. You did your homework with her. You know, and that just strengthened your bond. So there was no point in taking her away to do a board and train program if she was already doing so well. Because at the end of the day, she's working for you. She's not working for me. But with usually a board and train program, it takes a lot of the work away from the owner. You know, where we can, you know, help build your relationship a little bit closer. And also with her breed, she naturally gets attached to you a little bit more. So the bond is really what we need there, especially for the task that she's doing, because a lot of the tasks are psychological for her.
Right.
You know, and she's got to be there when those things happen to you. So, you know, with a physical service dog, and I always say, you know, it could be helpful for people that have invisible disabilities, because not all disabilities are visible. You know, and yes, people tend to be nosy and say, hey, what do you need this dog for? It's happened to me lots of times. But legally, 2 questions that people can ask you, or any establishment, is that dog a service dog, and does this dog perform a task to mitigate your disability?
Right. That's one of the things I wanted you to get to.
Absolutely. So those are only 2 questions someone can ask you. They are not allowed to ask what your specific disability is, what specifically does this dog do for you, anything like that. Only those 2 questions, and then you kind of move on from there.
Okay. My last question just went right out of my head. How about that? Well, Tamara, I thank you for spending time with us and sharing this information. I think it's important. I hope others will take advantage of the training, because I know sometimes when you have the Saturday sessions, which are group sessions, and she brings us all together, sometimes people are a little hesitant, and you can see that they're not as confident. But I just want to say, if they will be consistent,
That's right.
2, 3, 4 times a day, it's only a few minutes each time.
That's right.
The dog really will learn, and you'll become more confident. But is there any one thing as we close that you want us to know, want others to know about training, be it basic, advanced, service, anything that you think we should know that would help us moving forward, or help someone else moving forward?
Sure. So, you know, I really encourage people, you know, and I never really thought of this until I actually became a trainer, but, you know, having a trained dog is something that makes a dog happy. Because when we have a trained dog, the dog thrives on structure and boundaries, right? And essentially your bond with your dog is a lot closer. You know, it's very frustrating when we have a dog that doesn't listen to us, you know, whether it be the dog just running across the street when it shouldn't be, you know, or we just need a dog to, you know, for a service dog. You know, putting that time, you know, and spending that time with your dog really makes a huge difference. You know, when we get dogs because they're companions to us, right? So why not strengthen that bond a little bit, so that way they're not just, you know, hanging around the house, but, you know, you're actually having a relationship with your dog, you know, and you're spending time with this dog just like you would with family, right? You know, we don't just sit around the house with family all the time. We go out and do things, right? We're interactive with our dogs.
Right.
You know, and the dogs are happier for it. Now, you know, at the same time, we have to keep in mind that, you know, dogs are not around as long as humans are most of the time, you know, sadly, unfortunately. So we want to make the best of our time that we do have with them. And training can be a great thing to do with your dog to, you know, have a nice tight bond and relationship. And there's nothing better than somebody giving you a compliment when you're out in public with your dog, saying, hey, look at that guy or girl with their dog, and just look at how bonded they are. You know, that's the biggest compliment for me as a trainer with, you know, my demo dog is, man, look how much that dog loves that human. You know, and it's just because we have this relationship of, you know, we work together. He's my business partner. You know, he travels with me twice a year to Cleveland for continued education, and, you know, we do extra training and things like that. And, you know, it's like having a you know, a best friend all the time.
Yeah, it really is.
Absolutely.
Thanks. I really appreciate it.
Very good. Awesome. Nice job, Devin.